Did you ever wonder how much money you need to retire? I did too, so I spent the last week researching statistics and different numbers and calculations and also what other people from the finance sector say to find out how much we need and how to get there. So let's take a look at some numbers and also what the pitfalls are in retirement so that we don't run out of money in retirement or risk having to start working again. And also how we can calculate how much we need to live in retirement, how much we need to save in order to get there. And in that context, let's also talk withdrawal rates. I think retirement planning is important no matter what your age. And I found this US survey particularly interesting because when asked how much they need to retire, people answered they would need around $1 million. It was an average of $1.27 million over all age groups. But what they actually had saved up in their retirement accounts was way less than that. It was 10 times less than that. Even the ones who were already in the retirement age. So what this tells us is, for one, what you think you need and what you actually need are obviously two different things. But it also shows how important it is to not procrastinate on this. I do believe that there are a few pitfalls when it comes to retirement because there are some things that change. And for one, of course, there will be costs that go down. That is our savings rate, because once we are retired, we don't need to save anymore, at least not for retirement, because then we actually want to live off of that. So that is the cost that is not relevant anymore. What we also hopefully don't have anymore is a payment on the house. So the mortgage is hopefully paid off by then. And I have heard from other people, from older people, including my mom, that even if you don't plan to retire before the age of 65 or 67 or whatever the age is, the mortgage should not be calculated longer than 60 years. And not just the mortgage on your own house, but also mortgages on investment properties, because something just might come up. We might lose our job, we might have to stop working earlier because of health issues, or we simply don't want to work anymore. And that's just nice to have this buffer where you know that all of your debt has been paid off. Even when it's an investment property and the real estate is cash flow covered, even then it's a relief when the debt is paid off. And also that's actually the time we want to then live off the rental income. But I'll get to that later. Also at the time, if you have kids, they are grown up and are providing for themselves by now, so you don't have to pay for them. And you will also not have costs related to your work anymore. At the same time, there will be costs that go up. And this will be costs for healthcare, because, well, health issues usually come up at an older age. Then maybe your desired lifestyle in retirement, because then we will have a lot more free time than before. And when you are considering to go on vacations more, you will need to calculate that in. And even if you're spending more time at home than before, then also here the cost for utilities might go up. And also if the house is already older, there might be renovations due. Another thing to consider is inflation. Usually we calculate with an inflation rate of 2% per year. I think the further we are away from retirement, the harder this is actually to predict. I mean, in the last 2 years, inflation went up way more than that, even up to 8%. And lastly, our earning capacity goes down to zero. Okay, maybe not zero, but once we are retired, it'll be harder to make money. Maybe we are not physically able to, that will depend on the job. But it's also possible that even if we want to keep on working longer, our employer will not let us because he prefers to have younger people around. Of course, this will also depend on the job, but I think it's at least a possibility to consider that this might be something where we do not have a choice. So with all of that in mind, how can we find out how much we actually need to live in retirement? So for this, I found the income replacement ratio. That is a number where you take your income as a reference point. And the rule of thumb number here is that you will need between 70 and 80% of the income that you have right before you enter retirement. So for example, if your last income was $200,000 a year, then you can calculate with needing between $140,000 and $160,000 per year in retirement. Now, the younger you are now, the harder this number is to predict. What you can do is you can take your current salary and then calculate 2% growth per year on top until the age of retirement, of when you plan to retire, because that on average is the ways you can calculate with, because the 2% is there to balance out inflation. even if it doesn't always do that. So that's one method to take your income. The other way would be to take your expenses or your expected expenses in retirement. I think this version is helpful if you have a very high savings rate, because then you obviously will need not all of your income in retirement when you spend much less than that. If you choose to use your expenses, I would be very generous and take higher costs for health and also for utilities into consideration here. So now we have a number that we need every year. The next step is to figure out how to hit that number before we retire. And the way I see it is there are mainly 4 different sources of income in retirement that we prepare for in our working life. And the first one is Social Security income. That is in case you worked in a job that qualifies you for Social Security income. How exactly this one works will depend on the country you live in and also your kind of employment. And also, I think the younger you are, the less you can count on this one. Because with our societies growing older and older, I would not rely on this to cover all of your expenses. And the same goes for pension plans. Now, for some of you, a pension plan might have been set up by your employer, but this will also depend on the country you live in and on the employer. Some have it and some don't. And if you do, you usually can look up how much they will pay you as of a certain age, as of the retirement age, per month or per year. The third stream of income is out of individual retirement accounts. That is what you save for yourself that is supported by the state. Not all countries have it. In the US, this will be the 401k and the Roth IRA and also the HSA. In the UK, this will be the ISA and the LISA. And the nice thing about those accounts is they are tax advantaged. So either you saved on taxes while investing there, or later on you don't have to pay taxes on the income that comes from those retirement accounts. That is, if you don't use them as of a certain age. And the fourth source of income is what we saved and invested individually for ourselves. Because even if your state offers those individual retirement accounts, the amount of money you can actually put in there is usually capped. So ideally, you additionally build wealth through other investments as well. And this fourth source then will be how much money you actually put into assets like stocks and bonds and real estate and stuff that then, once you retire, either pay you an income or you can then live off the capital gain. So those, I think, were the 4 main sources of income in retirement. And I also think that the individual retirement account, if there is, and also the private retirement account, if you want to put it that way, are the 2 ones that are most important to us because we have the most control over. And next, how much do we actually contribute to those different accounts? Now, one rule of thumb number is that we should save 15% of our annual income for retirement. Another rule of thumb is that you should have invested 10 to 11 times your annual net salary before retirement. And those numbers are, I think, calculated with a 30-year horizon. So if you plan on retiring earlier, then you might need more than that. I personally think, and that's also the overall goal of this channel, is to become financially independent even before the age of retirement, so that your investments return so much that they cover all of your costs, your necessary costs, and ideally also, the costs of the life you want to live. And once we are at this point, we'll actually never run out of money because we are financially free. Of course, even then, the withdrawal rate is a relevant topic. Now, Dave Ramsey, for example, he calculates with an average of 12% return per year minus a 4% inflation rate, which is already relatively safely calculated. But then he comes to a withdrawal rate of 8% per year. And this, for me personally, seems a bit much, especially when you like to be on the safe side. Of course, that doesn't mean that you cannot withdraw the 8% if you actually do have a 12% return. But if you have a 12% return, will also depend on your asset allocation. So if you have a lot of bonds in your asset allocation, the 12% is probably a bit overly optimistic. If you have more stocks in your asset allocation and you actually see that you have a 12% return or more than that, of course, it doesn't hurt to withdraw that much. But it also doesn't hurt to be prepared to withdraw less than that if the return is less than 12%. An alternative take on that is the Trinity study, with back then in the days calculated a safe withdrawal rate of 4%. Safe withdrawal here means without having the risk of running out of money. And this 4% withdrawal rate became actually popular in the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, and you might also heard of it as the 4% rule. Many people from the FIRE movement use this 4% rule, and they also retired with less than 1 million. There also has been an update on the Trinity study where they say that 4.5% is actually the worst case scenario, and when the market is good you can also withdraw up to 7% per year. My personal take on this is I like to be on the safe side, and I'd rather calculate more conservative now where I still have control over how much I actually save up and invest, and I calculate with 3% because I'd rather than later have more to spend than I expected than the other way around. So instead of having to fear that it's not going to be enough. But obviously that's a decision everyone has to make for themselves. If you want me to dive deeper into this topic of withdrawal rates, let me know in the comments. And if you want to learn more about the income streams of the different assets, I made a video about this here. Thank you for watching, and I hopefully see you there. Bye bye.